All right, welcome to another episode of SnackBreak by OrthoSnacks. I'm your host, John Schaefer, and on this podcast, I interview physical therapists, fitness professionals, and health and wellness experts. My guest today, for the first time ever, we've got a dynamic duo. We've got Dr. Bryan Guski and Dr. Tim Reynolds. Both are 2014 graduates of Ithaca College and are residency trained at Ithaca Medical Center. And they're both board certified in orthopedics, both certified strength and conditioning specialists. Bryan recently obtained his MBA. Congratulations, Bryan. And Tim is an anatomy and physiology professor at his alma mater. So thank you guys so much for coming on the show. I know you're kind of making the podcast circuit right now, and I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me.
Thanks for having us,
John. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, so I would like to kind of start our conversation by talking a little bit about when you guys met. Like, did you ever see yourselves in that first year of PT school, eventually going on to become great friends or even write a book together?
Tim and I were definitely close throughout school. So we were always, hanging out and coming up with kind of some crazy ideas, both in and outside of the PT space. And I think just, both being in residency together after graduation really brought us that much closer. I was sleeping on Tim's floor literally for weekend courses when I was living in Utica at the time, working in a private practice, and I'd head out to Ithaca for our weekend courses. And so Tim and I would bunk up, or I said I'd bunk up with him and and bring my blow up mattress. And so we just kind of got pretty close throughout that year, and I've remained close since.
Yeah, no, I think, think back to PT school, our last year of our doctorate program, Bryan and I were part of a project where we were taking a look at throwing analysis with youth baseball players. And so we did a bunch of work there, obviously close throughout the didactic coursework of Ithaca's program. And then I think post-residency, that's when everything sort of really kicked off, when we were sort of struggling together, learning all these CPGs and manual techniques for a 12-month program. And then fortunate enough to have the opportunity to stay close since then. So
yeah. So in your residency search, was that something you guys ever saw happening? Was it going to the same residency program?
Not really. No, I applied for a few different programs. I applied to one out in California. I applied to one in Florida, a couple in New York, and Ithaca, just given what was going on in my life at the time, seemed to be the best fit, or I should say Ithaca Medical Center. And they were also starting an external residency program. So I would be able to get all of the benefits of going through the Ithaca Medical Center residency, which is very strong on a very well-run program. At the time, it was Mike Costello, who's both a mentor of Tim and I, who was running it. And he was starting this external program so I could live and work in Utica, but then still get all the benefits of going out for the weekend courses and the mentorship and all those pieces. So Tim was I'll let him speak for his plan, but he ended up staying in Ithaca. And so it just kind of, I don't know, naturally just worked out that way.
Yeah, I took a little different approach. I think it was KU Medical Center's program was the only residency I applied to. It was either go back home and be a sort of a managerial route to become a clinic director at like my home PT clinic that I sort of was a PT aide at for years, or do residency and then sort of see where life took me from there. So applied for Cayuga's program, was fortunate enough to be the internal resident, which allowed me to work directly at the facility. And like Bryan said, have the benefit of the didactic courses for 12 months. But that also opened up other doors to teaching, and then eventually getting hired full-time at Cayuga Medical and sort of staying stuck in Ithaca.
Nice. So were the crazy ideas still flowing throughout residency, or did you feel like you had less time to kind of focus on the other things? It was more important to kind of nail down the clinical knowledge and things like that.
I think every now and then, I think you get to a point in a weekend course when you're there for like 16 hours that by the end, your brain just starts like wandering, and you just kind of start looking for different ways to distract yourself a little bit. So I think even throughout then, we were like pitching just random ideas to one another. And obviously the book that we just put out was one of the products of, the tail end of one of those courses, with me just kind of throwing something out to Tim. But yeah, no, we had different ideas flowing, I think, throughout. I don't know if Tim's recollection is the same, but
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think there's only so much neck and back pain that you can sit through in a 2-day course, and then probably by that 4:30 p.m. on Sunday, you're really starting to get a little bit crazy. And so, like Brian said, of the ideas that were pitched throughout the year, movers and mentors is probably the one that stuck. So
yeah.
Okay. I mean, I can definitely relate to that, just in terms of having a bunch of different ideas flowing through my head and not necessarily ever knowing like what to commit more time to. Do you guys have any advice for someone in that situation? Like, where do you put in all your efforts to make sure that you're finding a winner? Is it more like dispersing your efforts across the board and seeing what sticks?
That's a really good question. I'm reading a book right now. It's called Change Makers. I mentioned it actually in another podcast that we did. It's by John Berardi. He's one of the founders of Precision Nutrition, which is a pretty popular kind of holistic nutrition counseling and coaching service or company. And he talks about going through this process for prioritization of essentially making yourself a bracket, like a basketball bracket, and writing down your ideas or things that you need to get done, your tasks, and using that as kind of a way to triage, well, what should I be working on now? If it's like, a new product or service line idea, I think that gets a little bit more complex or complicated, because you need to look at, well, what's the return on this investment? How much time is this going to take? Who do I have along with me working on this thing? That gets a little bit more complicated. But if you're just prioritizing tasks or items on like a to-do list, drawing yourself a bracket can be helpful.
Okay.
Yeah, I think sort of continue with that idea. I think you can take a look at it from multiple different lenses. One is from a feasibility standpoint. I think we all have lofty goals, and I think that there's this idea of having too many hats on, and then you're having 16 half-finished projects that don't necessarily ever get completed. And so I think as you're making that sort of to-do list, I'm a big fan of writing down the goal, and then what are the 5 action steps below that goal, and how can I make a strive to sort of pursue one of those today, which will help me in the long term sort of complete that big task. At the end of the day, also, I think it turns into what can I get done fastest? So I actually feel like I'm making some positive gains. Brian and I are sitting on a research article that we worked on for residency.
You really want to admit this, Tim?
Oh yeah, man. I mean, I think it's like real life stuff. Like I'm sitting on data from like 2015, 2016, and I sort of like cycle it through every 6 months or so. And so my goal for 2022 is this is going to get published. But it's like one of those things that there's a lot of action steps I have to take into effect in order for that to happen. But I think what can get done the soonest, but also like Brian was talking about, that bracket component of what are the action steps needed to be able to accomplish that task.
Yeah, I really like that, guys. Those are both actionable items that people can actually take and implement into their lives. I think that all too often when you ask for advice on things like this, it's come up with to-do lists and things like that. You just get general advice and not necessarily specific, these specific proven methods that work for you guys. So that's awesome. And I think something else that's beneficial too, or at least has been for me, is do something every day where you'll see short-term progress. That you can see immediate results, and then also contribute to something that's going to give you long-term progress down the road. So definitely some good advice that I will try and incorporate in my life. So obviously you guys ended up deciding the idea you were going to go with was the book. And just hearing kind of your story on some other podcasts, it seems like kind of the driving factor was you noticed all these big names coming up during your residency in different books, the research you're reading, these names continue to come up time and time again. So what did you guys do with that information, knowing that you were seeing these names over and over again?
So we essentially compiled a, kind of dream team list, if you will, of people that if we had the opportunity to sit down and talk with them, or, have several email exchanges with them, who would be on that list. And then the second part of that is, well, what types of questions would we want to ask them? So that's really kind of the 2 parts, is deciding who, and then deciding essentially the what, what do we want to ask.
hmm And so I guess just to kind of follow up on that, how did you decide, how did you narrow down that question list, or how long did it take to kind of hone in what information you wanted from these people?
Yeah, I mean, we were both sort of reading a book at the time by Tim Ferriss. So
Mhm.
Tools and Titans, really cool book. It has the opportunity to interview a variety of different movers and shakers in multiple industries. So like Arnold Schwarzenegger, Oprah Winfrey. And so sort of modeling the book based off of some of Tim Ferriss's questions, but also taking some civil liberty to know who is our audience, because at the time we were the audience that we were making this book for. We were new graduates from residency program. We're young professionals. We graduated from physical therapy school, which means that we know a lot about a lot of things and are not confident in treating patients on our own, right? So it's like, I remember being a week away from graduating my doctorate and still trying to figure out how to fix people with back pain. You're just throwing a bunch of different exercises at them and you just did not feel confident, and you're sort of inundated with imposter syndrome and all this other stuff at the time. And so I think we developed a list of questions, and Brian sort of spearheaded that to try to figure out what would be valuable for individuals like ourselves and kids that are currently trying to navigate their way through PT school. So things like, what would be good advice that you would provide a young graduate? What would be bad advice? What are bad recommendations that you hear in your area of specialty? Because we interviewed a relatively wide net of clinicians, ranging from orthopedics to neurological, to pain science, to pelvic floor specialists. And so we wanted to know within those different niches, what are bad recommendations that they typically hear? And then sort of continuing on from that, sort of good life advice stuff, like the concepts regarding failure. What's your favorite failure? What did you learn from that failure? And I think having the opportunity to normalize failure amongst a cohort or a group of students that typically are type A personalities that do not like to fail is really valuable. And other things like favorite books to some of their best investments and stuff like that. So it was a fun list of questions to ask, because they're the answers to those questions you will not find in a research paper, and you will not typically find on a social media post. And I think that was one of the most exciting things about the project.
Yeah, I'd actually read Tim Ferriss's book, Tools of Titans. And before I had listened to your other podcasts and known that it was framed off that, I was like, this is an oddly familiar setup. And it's a good one too. It's effective in that, you can take it, pick it up, read it in the morning, get one person's story, and then pick it up the next day. It's not something you have to crush all at once. That's what I think makes it so valuable. So I guess just in determining the types of people you wanted to interview, obviously there's so many different individuals you could have grabbed from. And this question, it's not necessarily about why you chose the people you chose. It's more what qualities make up a great mentor. And kind of how did that lead you to some of these individuals? Like, did you have any set criteria?
We didn't have, Tim and I joke about this, like we wish we could have developed some like robust Excel sheet that had, X amount of columns on there, 10 columns, and, go through each name and say, oh, they produced this much research or this many publications. Oh, they've mentored this many students. And obviously the feasibility of that is, very, very challenging for, the time constraints and other things that Tim and I have going on. So it was kind of more so doing some research, asking people, and asking some of our guests that we, were close to, or that we have talked to in the past, so we're going to interview, you for the book, but, who would you recommend we speak to? And then once they gave us a few names, going and diving into those names and trying to understand what they've done or what they currently do. And as Tim kind of alluded to, trying to cast a pretty wide net and have various different specialties, or whether it's business, business leaders, researchers, expert clinicians, kind of picking for many different areas within the rehab or PT space. In terms of good qualities of a mentor, I really think a lot of times with a good mentor, it's kind of a two-way street. Like you're sharing things with them and you're helping them get better as a mentor. And then obviously the more common relationship that we're familiar with, is the mentor kind of teaching you things. But I really think it's kind of a give and take. And Simon Sinek has a good interview about that, actually, where he thanked his mentor after like years of coaching him on various things. And his mentor turns around and says, Simon, thanks for being my mentor. And so I always thought that was really, really interesting. I like the way he framed it. So I think it's definitely a give and take, but a mentor is really somebody that is doing, in my mind, kind of doing the thing that you want to be doing, and is willing to kind of take you under their wing, sort of, and kind of show you the ropes, if you will, and, help you understand that there's going to be bumps in the road and failures along the way, but steer you away from those failures because they've already encountered them. And obviously a good mentor isn't going to want you to fail so bad that it puts you in a bad spot. So I think just having their experience and having their guidance and wisdom is really powerful. And then again, it kind of goes both ways.
Sure. Anything to add, Tim?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the benefits of residency training, or at least the residency that Brian and I completed, was that we had the opportunity to be mentored, quote unquote, by give or take 8 to 10 clinicians, sort of periodically throughout the whole experience. And so when I think back and reflect on who was a valuable mentor during that opportunity, it was the one that didn't teach you everything, because there was some level of struggling in order to have self-growth and self-development. Because if a mentor just provides you with the answers to everything, then there's no opportunity for you to navigate around those small speed bumps, if you would. And so I think, like Brian was talking about, someone that's willing to teach you, but that opportunity to give back and ask questions and then challenge their learning, I think is also a really valuable component. It should not be just a one-way stream of consciousness into you. And so I think, sort of piggybacking off what Brian was saying with that, I think that is a valuable aspect to it. And sort of continue with Brian's idea of modeling that individual. I think one of the benefits of the book was that there's over 75 individuals who we have the opportunity to ask questions to, so that you can create your own mentor, if you would, because not every clinician in here is going to speak to every one of our readers. Right? There's going to be individuals that say, I really want to go into private practice, versus the individual that says, I want to be my own sole proprietor, right? I want to start my own company. And so your thoughts and opinions or your research background does not speak to me. But that opportunity to take the different components of that mentorship, if you would, and then create this sort of master mold of mentee learning opportunities is sort of one of the benefits and one of the goals that we had with this book project. But I think that's the same concept with regards to good mentorship also, like having the opportunity to say, I really appreciate the fact that you are punctual, good, you communicate well with your patients, they always come back, they request you. I really appreciate your hands-on skills, right? So you figure out, what do I want to develop myself as a clinician, and then reach out to those individuals. And I think that's one of the biggest things that this project also showed us, was the willingness that our profession has to want to help other people within our profession. And so ask the questions to the mentors that you want to receive, right? So you can kick somebody an email, you can send them a message on Instagram, you can reach out to them on their website, and there's a pretty good chance that there's going to be an answer to that question that you have. So sort of asking the questions to the individuals who you want to model, because they're most likely going to be willing to provide some level of support.
Yeah, that's something I think that I've been a little bit surprised with too, and just doing some of these interviews, is for the most part, my success rate in getting people to talk to me has been pretty high. I mean, and I think that once you reach a certain level of success, you realize you haven't gotten there by yourself, and you want to get back to the profession and those looking to do some more things that you're doing. So I think that it's definitely prevalent within the profession as well, which is great. I did have a question about, so you mentioned that you guys kind of wrote the book for yourselves initially, and that you were seeking out mentorship. I'm just curious kind of how that lines up with residency training, because you would think someone who's, in the middle of residency training is getting a lot of mentorship. Was there any disconnect between those two?
So Tim and I, we came up with the idea while we were in residency. Like as Tim said, we were both reading that book, Tools of Titans by Tim Ferriss. And I basically said, like, this is a great idea for a book. Like, he's interviewing Tony Robbins and, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Like, it would be great if we could apply this to our profession, or if there's a book out there like this in our profession. And then we kind of kicked it around for a bit, and it actually went a couple of years, 3 years, until we started writing it. And at the time when we started writing it, Tim and I, we were, personally, and I think, we both were also seeking out mentorship for kind of other professional growth areas, but Tim was starting to teach, and I stepped into a residency director role. So we were getting asked a lot of questions from residents, from students, it kind of within the context of the questions that we asked our guests. So we kind of looked at one another and we're saying, man, I'm getting a lot of questions about X, Y, and Z. And Tim's like, yeah, I kind of get those questions too. And then it kind of came full circle where we were like, well, what if we asked like our leaders and, leaders within the profession and some of our mentors and those types of questions. So that's where it kind of came full circle. We were seeking out mentorship, but to a greater degree, we were like, we're getting asked a lot of questions. I wonder what so-and-so would say about this. Cause I'm certainly, with 5 years of practice under my belt, not an expert in, the professional track and decisions with regards to that, but Tim Flynn, might be, or Shirley Starman might be. So let's reach out to them.
Yeah. So it sounds more like you guys were receiving some great mentorship already, but just kind of sharing the wealth and providing an even greater resource. You guys touched on this a little bit earlier, but just the feeling of imposter syndrome coming out of graduation, just before graduation. How did you guys personally deal with that? Maybe we can start with Tim.
Yeah, I think that's something that I still deal with today. And I think understanding and normalizing, and I've mentioned this before to other individuals, understanding that failure is normal, failure is okay, failure is a growth opportunity. Imposter syndrome is normal, imposter syndrome is okay, and imposter syndrome is an opportunity for growth and expansion of yourself also. I've heard Bryan say a couple times the idea that if you reach a point in time where you've sort of eliminated the imposter syndrome, then you're probably not challenging yourself enough, right? I think like that idea that if you are in a state, and think about, so John, you have your CSCS, right? So you work with individuals, understand the strength and conditioning philosophies, but like if you're never overloading an individual, right? If you're never trying to reach adaptation, then you're just going to continue to plateau. And so I think that we have to optimize ourselves and sort of flirt with that boundary point of this is beyond my scope and my capabilities, because that's where true growth and opportunity has the opportunity to flourish. And so I look at most recent imposter syndrome was this entire semester, right? I do not have a PhD. I do not have a DSC. I have a clinical doctorate in physical therapy. I am not by any means a physiology expert. I think my anatomy knowledge is pretty solid, right? But I walked into this situation sort of taking on this anatomy and physiology role at Ithaca College where I'm teaching 180 students and I'm like the dude, right? And so this whole semester was, but I'm not as smart as Tom Swenson. I'm not as smart as Chuck Saccone. How do I walk in their shoes? And I think what that provided me the opportunity to do was, okay, well, what can you do? Control the controllables, right? And I think if I had to talk to students today about imposter syndrome, that'd be one of my big points. After normalizing it, what do I have the capacity to control? I could control the amount of time that I put into my prep work. I could control the amount of time that I put into my studying for the lecture. I could control the assignments and all these other aspects of the course itself. And so I think when you put those cards down, you're like, I've done my best. And at the end of the day, if you can say, I put 110% into this, I know it's not perfect, but it's my 110%. That's where you have the opportunity to accept that imposter syndrome and say, this is a growth opportunity. Versus having that be a source of a negative stressor where you feel like you are actually being drowned, if you would, by that imposter syndrome.
Okay. Yeah, I like that a lot. Do you have anything to add, Bryan?
Yeah, I think Tim definitely hit the main points on that. We've had discussions, side discussions about this. I think if you don't have some level of imposter syndrome, either you're very arrogant, right, and you kind of think you know it all, which isn't right, or you're not being challenged enough, which depending on your career goals or professional goals or personal things, probably isn't right either. If your goal is to do better and learn more and serve better. So I think those are the major points. Some level of it is healthy because it acts as a kind of a fire, right? It's gonna, if you have that, if you have some kind of view that, man, I don't belong in this position, I'm not smart enough to be here, I don't have enough experience, that's going to cause you to want to learn more and seek out more information and ultimately do better.
Definitely.
So I think some level of it is definitely healthy.
That's some great insight. The next thing I want to do is, so a lot of times on my podcast episodes, I like to provide my guests an opportunity to get an idea of how an individual got where they are currently. So I'm going to ask you guys a couple of questions just about the process of kind of writing a book for someone who's interested in doing so. And then I'm going to ask both Brian and Tim separate questions regarding kind of their current journey. So just in terms of actually putting the book together, taking it from idea to getting it on paper, what were some of the biggest challenges you guys faced?
I think compiling the data, if you will, was definitely just a logistical and operational hurdle. Tim and I are sending out, we sent out over probably 100 and I don't know what, Tim, 150 emails just at the outset. And then you're getting response on all those emails. Well, some of them. And then you're going back and forth, and then you're setting up interviews, recording those interviews. I'm jumping way ahead of myself, but either way, I think just like getting all of the data together and then keeping it organized in one place, which, shameless plug for Google Docs here. We use Google Docs, and it compiled everything. And then we just kind of dumped everything into that, and then we'd go back in our downtime and then clean it up and kind of turned it into a version 1 of a manuscript that ended up having probably, I don't know, 20 versions. So that was definitely a hurdle at the beginning. How we structured the book, doing the interviews, that's a lot of transcription time. So transcribing the interviews after recording them. A 1-hour interview would take us 5 hours probably to transcribe. So that was a lot of time. And then I think at that point, once we had the kind of raw, manuscript, and it was in a presentable format, then we had to seek out a copy editor, which we used some connections that Tim had at Ithaca, got that completed. And then even after the copy editor went through, normally books that get published have 3, 4, 5 copy editors going through the manuscript. We had one copy editor go through it maybe once or twice. So then Tim and I had to come back in and clean it up and massage it even more. So it was definitely a lot of steps to get it to the product that it's at today, and to get it as, clean and hopefully polished as we think it is, at least. So Tim can, I don't know, fill in anything I left off there, any other hurdles that jump out.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, depending on the type of book that you're trying to write, there's a variety of different steps. One of the, benefits of our book was that we were accumulating all the pages, the words from other individuals. We just put them on paper, right? And so that idea that Brian was talking about, like transcribing a hour and a half interview, like I think Kelly Starrett was one of our guests, and Kelly was an awesome interview. Real energetic dude, a lot of awesome information. I think I talked to Kelly Starrett for about an hour and 35 minutes or so. And then you have to listen to that one sentence at a time, press pause, write down that sentence, and then go back and forth and back and forth. And when you do that 60, 70 times, that turns into a lot of man hours. And that's not even necessarily a polished product like Brian was talking about. So I think moving forward, if for someone trying to write a book in general, I think build your team. I think that's a really important concept of these are the individuals who are going to read my drafts, right? Like Brian said, we did a lot of work ourselves. We had some family members help with this. We had the opportunity to have some outside sources also take a look at this, but have a really solid support team and have them know their role within that team, because it does take a team and it takes a tribe, if you would, in order to get this whole project to occur. And so that would be one of them. And I think probably our biggest fault would be reach out to your individual who's actually going to put the book together once you actually have a finished product. Because I think we reached out to our individual who was going to actually put the formatting of everything. We reached out to them about 4.5, 5 months too early. And so all the different iterations that we had to send back and forth to them, they probably got a little frustrated by the end of the project. But
yeah,
we learned from our mistakes.
We are very thankful for our book designer. Yes,
I'm sure. So just with all those hurdles and things like that, was there ever a time where you didn't think the book was going to come together? Or was it more just keep your head down, keep going, and eventually it's going to turn out?
I think we got so far along, and every time we hit a point like that, there'd be a week or 2 weeks where we wouldn't make any progress on it. We thought about like all of the people that we interviewed and the time that the people that wanted to email their answers, like the time that they took to write everything out. We were like, we can't drop the ball now. Like we've come too far. And at that, when we were hitting those blocks, it was later on in the process. It was like the formatting and the reading and the transcribing when we would hit those blocks. Because when we were getting the responses and actually doing the live interviews, like that's exciting stuff. Every time, you got an email back from Stu McGill or John Childs, like you get really excited about that. Like, wow, they actually want to contribute. Let's go. So that was like kind of, seeing progress and pushing us along. But yeah, when we hit those blocks, we'd say, man, yeah, this sucks. I really don't feel like doing this tonight. I want to go to bed, but you cannot, we thought we couldn't drop the ball now.
Yeah, sort of continue with that. I mean, there was a lot of responsibility that we had based on the fact that we took up a lot of people's time. Right? I mean, I think when you think about 75 interviews, those individuals either sat down and composed their answers or they met with us. And so we had that level of responsibility. And in addition, Brian and I had each other to sort of keep each other accountable too, right? I mean, it's like one of those things that like, hey, like I can't let you down because my job was to transcribe this interview to put it into the manuscript by tomorrow. And so I think we held each other accountable throughout this entire process. We probably wanted to chew each other's heads off at times, but we balance each other out. Pretty good dichotomy of a teamwork, which is really solid. But I think when I look back and reflect on it, it was never, I don't think this is going to happen. It's when is this actually going to happen? The time frame was the biggest question. Is this going to be a 3-year project, or are we actually going to finish this in 2021? And so I think that was probably my biggest question that I had about the completion of the book.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And just kind of going off that too, I'm wondering, what did your schedule kind of look like in terms of how much you were going to write on a given day? I know a lot of it depends on, response rate, when people are getting back to you with what information. Did you have any kind of a schedule you could stick to?
So you have to think back to what was the world doing when we first started this project, right? So we got our first response was in September 2019, right? So that's when we were sending out emails. And that was when we first got some responses back. And so the world kind of hit a curveball and then swung and missed a couple of times in March of 2021 or 2020. And so from a clinic standpoint, my clinic hours were significantly reduced. And that did free up a lot of time for transcribing and conducting interviews. I was also teaching at the time. And so with a cutback in my clinical hours and teaching remotely, I had all the time in the world to write a book. And so it's amazing how hindsight and sort of how these big negatives in your life at the time can actually find some positives from it. the pandemic really opened up an opportunity for Brian and I to complete this project by October of this past year. So
everything works out.
yeah.
Go ahead if you have anything to add, Brian.
No, it was we found time for our schedules to align because everyone got really comfortable doing things virtually, and so Tim and I would have a lot of virtual meetings and work through stuff, and basically found time on weekends or afternoons when you would normally be like going out doing stuff that we weren't going out and doing stuff.
Yeah. So now I want to dive into each of your journeys individually a little bit. So Brian, you got your MBA this past year. So can you kind of take me through the thought process in obtaining the MBA and kind of what added benefit that has for you now?
Yeah. So I started getting interested in learning a little bit more about business and the business of healthcare. After I had been practicing for 3 years. I went back, so I worked for the University of Rochester Medical Center, and as being an employee by the medical center, we're offered some tuition reimbursement for any coursework at the university. So I went back to Simon Business School and entered a master's in medical management program, which is an 18-month program that taught me a lot about kind of the finance side of hospitals, a little bit about organizational like hierarchy, a little bit on marketing, but mostly about the accounting and finance and kind of the business, essentially the economics of healthcare and hospitals. And that was interesting. I liked that. It was very fast. It was pretty intense. I felt like also at that time I had stepped into the residency director role, and I was very committed and very consumed by that. So I didn't really pull out as much out of the medical management program as I would have liked. So that program actually fulfilled about 50% of the MBA program. So I said, I'll go back and I'll finish the MBA about a year later. So I started that in 2018, I believe, or 2019. And I completed the MBA program just earlier this year. So I think it's helped me understand a little bit more about consumer behavior and economics behind healthcare, but also just medicine in general. So even though we're obviously helping people and helping people feel better, move better, and live better lives, patients are consumers. They have choices. And they have a choice to decide whether they're going to see PTA or PTB or go to A location versus B location. So what are the decision factors behind that, and what is their reasoning, and is it related to satisfaction? Is it outcome? Is it patient experience? And I think the answer is all of those things, but some weigh more heavily than others. And how do you leverage that with regards to the economics and kind of different things behind productivities and whatnot. That was part of my education as well. So yeah, I'd say it's helped me think a little bit differently about my role as a physical therapist. It's helped me look at healthcare through the lens of a patient and a consumer a little bit better. And it's also just helped me understand businesses. Like I couldn't tell you what the sole proprietorship or LLC was, before going back to business school, but you come out knowing those things. So that's helpful as well. And when you're reading things or hearing about things, you just kind of understand it a little bit better.
Okay. And then another question I have for you is just about your role when you were a residency director. Kind of how did you find that position? What was it like? How do you step into that role from moving from a physical therapist to more of an administrative role within a residency?
Yeah. So I started by taking on a coordinator role as a spine team coordinator. So we have 20 therapists 15 to 20 therapists that kind of focus and specialize in seeing spine problems. And so we have a coordinator for that team, as well as, we have a foot and ankle team, a shoulder team, bunch of teams. And I stepped into the spine coordinator role. And then the orthopedic residency director role opened up shortly after I stepped into that role. So I also jumped onto that role. So then I was working on doing essentially both roles, but there was a lot of overlap. Obviously orthopedic residencies focus a lot on spine impairments and spine problems. So it was just kind of a happy marriage of the two roles. So that's how I kind of got into it. And it's been a lot of fun. I came out of my residency program knowing a lot, having a lot of new information, and all I want to do is like share that stuff with other PTs and, oftentimes younger PTs and graduates. And so it's very, very fulfilling.
Awesome. Kind of a trend I'm hearing between the both of you is just a natural progression of everything seeming to work out in the best possible way. So kudos to you guys.
Yeah, don't get us wrong. There's definitely been a few hurdles there and failures. One failure, this will be the last thing I mention. I went through that medical management program in order to get a site manager position because I wanted to move up in administration. And I interviewed for that role right after I finished the medical management program. Like, hey, I'm done. I'm ready. Like, let's go. It's game time. Put me in, coach. And I didn't get that role. And that was a big, that was a kind of a reality check, gut check. And that ultimately pushed me, one, to go back and get the MBA, and also pushed me to work on this project more with Tim. So, I'm a big believer in everything works out for the best. I know you can poke holes in that, and depending on your philosophy or what have you, you might not believe that, but I think things definitely work out for the best. You just got to stay positive and keep working.
And yeah, one other thing I will add, just we see the end product of where you guys are now, but there's so much work that goes in behind the scenes, so many failures that happen along the way, and it's just so important that you continue to move forward and give your best effort, and then things like you said will end up working out in the end, hopefully. So I got a couple of questions for Tim too. Tim's enjoying many of the benefits of being a professor right now over his winter break. He's got most of the month of January off. But Tim, tell me a little bit about how you stepped into your role as a professor.
Yeah, and I think this is sort of one of those things that within physical therapy, one of the blessings of the profession is the opportunity to cast your own career net wide, right? I think we graduate with a doctorate in physical therapy, but that means you have the opportunity to become a clinic director. You can teach continuing education courses. You can make podcasts, right? You can do social media marketing. You can do all these different things. And teaching in academia is one of those avenues that a lot of individuals at least try to dabble with at some point in time. And during my residency program in the fall semester, I was asked to teach anatomy physiology labs. And so I took a look at my schedule. I was treating patients mostly full-time as per the residency requirements, taking residency courses. And I said, yeah, I could probably sleep less and teach more. And so I taught two night labs as a resident. And that was my foot in the door, which eventually, when I moved back to Ithaca, took on a couple more labs, and then started to teach exercise physiology and clinical physiology labs. Started to do that more as a full-time gig in addition to treating patients full-time. And when a position opened up at Ithaca to be sort of the course coordinator for their anatomy physiology program, I put my name in the hat with 4 years of clinic or teaching experience on top of all this clinical experience that I had. And was fortunate enough to get the position. And so I think for those individuals who are trying to figure out and navigate this, how do I get into academia realm? It turns into just be willing to participate in any way, shape, or form to the academic program that's close by. Send the course coordinator an email, say, hi, if you need anybody to guest speak, guest lecture, come in and help with some labs or take on some students. However you can provide a benefit to them would probably be my introduction or recommendation, as long as you didn't want to go back and get your PhD or DSC.
Okay, so it's a situation where do you need a terminal degree to teach? Is that correct? So
yeah, so you need some level of terminal degree to the individuals that you're teaching. So the anatomy physiology program that I teach right now, we have PTs, OTs, ATs, exercise science, medical focus with a strength and conditioning focus, pre-med. So all those individuals, I need to have the terminal degree of the individual that's going to be taking it. So our PTs would be getting the DPT. So therefore I have
Gotcha.
background. Yeah.
And then, so what does it kind of look like in terms of balancing teaching versus clinical practice in terms of your typical week?
Yeah, so significantly better than it used to be, because I was treating patients 40 hours a week and teaching 18 credits a semester. So that used to be a lot of clinic time in the morning and then teaching until give or take 9:30 at night. And so thankfully, I have the opportunity to teach twice a week. In terms of lectures, I lecture on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then I teach labs on Wednesday afternoons, which allows for me to treat patients Monday mornings and Wednesday mornings. There's a blessing and a curse in academia. You have a lot more time, in my perception. Granted, when you come from like 2 full-time jobs to 1 full-time job, you always have more time. But there's a lot of behind the scenes work that I think a lot of students may not necessarily understand that goes into lesson prepping, lecture prep, writing exams, creating content, grading. So there's a lot of like busy work, but I do a lot of that busy work on my couch watching Netflix. So there's a quality of life points situation that gets boosted too. So.
Awesome. I think that definitely provides a little bit of insight into the teaching aspect of things. So just scratch the surface, but I think that's plenty for that. So we'll go into a speed round now. I ask all my guests at the end of the podcast the same 5 questions. Are you guys up for answering them?
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome.
Sure.
So the first question I have for you guys is, what is your biggest key to a successful day?
I'll go first. Is that cool? For me, sweat or some form of exercise or movement.
Okay, nice.
You want me to expand on that?
You can elaborate. You can elaborate on a little bit.
Yeah, I think it just sets me up. It's kind of my anchor for the day. I think that it kind of puts me on the right path. It gives me an opportunity to wake up and kind of, before jumping into thinking and working on a lot of different things, get out of my head a little bit and kind of just move, gets a bunch of good endorphins flowing. And yeah, I think sets me on the right path for the day.
What's the ideal workout time for you?
Oof, significantly shorter than it used to be. I used to be like a 90 to 2 hour kind of guy in the gym, and I don't even to this day I don't understand how I ever did that. But you have a little extra time when you're in school between classes and whatnot. Now it's probably an hour and 15 minutes. Nice. 60 to 75 minutes, including warm up and a little mobility work at the end, I'd say.
All right. How about you, Tim? Greatest key to a successful day?
I think it's getting up early.
How early are we talking?
So my alarm goes off at 5. There's a pretty good chance that I beat my alarm just waking up. Unfortunately, my circadian rhythms sort of like smack me in the face every couple of days. But I think when I wake up early and get started on my day, those are my successful days. And usually that involves getting a workout in at 5:30. So I'll try to roll out of bed, get dressed, prep for the day, and then work out until about 6:30, 6:45. And then that allows me to start treating patients around 7 or so. But having sort of checked that box, and like Brian talked about from an endorphin release standpoint, just that sense of accomplishment, sort of that idea from a mental standpoint of I got up and I sort of took today by the horns versus fighting that urge to just sleep an hour longer or roll back over after turning off your alarm. I think it gives you sort of that win for the day.
Yeah, and I think having that time in the morning to yourself too, while everyone else is still asleep, is pretty awesome. Next question is there any advice you wish someone would have given you 5 years ago that would significantly impact where you're at right now?
Coming from I wouldn't say I'm necessarily impatient. I'm willing to put in work, but everything takes time. And it takes time. You don't know the things that you don't know. And, oftentimes I think when I came out of school, I'm like, oh yeah, I want to, open up my own practice immediately, and start doing, my own entrepreneurial thing. It's like, well, you haven't really gotten enough repetitions yet. You haven't seen enough patients to really understand patterns and do a good job with the patient in front of you. And again, there's lots of successful PT business and clinic owners that did that right out of school and kind of learned as they went. But I'm like, I need to get around people and quality mentors, quality clinicians, so that I can understand the service and do a better job at the service before I start my own service. So I think like everything takes time. You don't know what you don't know. You got to learn those things before you take the next step.
Awesome.
I would say get comfortable with making yourself vulnerable. And that can go on multiple different tiers. Vulnerability from taking on new tasks, vulnerability from an emotional standpoint. But I think back to like residency and that idea of like those days where you're being mentored. And so you have a full day of mentorship and having someone else looking over your shoulder treating patients, and how there are times when I was thankful that someone would have canceled because I was concerned about how I would perform treating that patient in front of my mentor. But looking back on it, I was like, man, but those are the opportunities that you should have and so like excited to have someone provide guidance. And so I think, like Brian said, you don't know what you don't know, but understanding and embracing that vulnerability to allow for yourself to ask questions. It's okay that you don't know stuff because you don't have the experience yet, but put yourself and challenge yourself to be more vulnerable in all aspects of your life.
Awesome. Next question I have for you guys is there any book or product other than your own that you've used over the last 3 months that has significantly impacted your life?
Yeah, I would say I mentioned it earlier, Changemakers by John Berardi. I think the subtitle is How to Turn Your Passion for Health and Fitness into a Successful Career. It's a really great kind of blueprint on, if you really are passionate about health, fitness, wellness, kind of lifestyle medicine, how do you actually take that passion and turn it into a business, whether that's a business just for yourself or growing that and scaling that like he did with Precision Nutrition. That was a great book. I've been working on Blink for about 10 months now. And I will get back to you once I finish that.
View to come. I like it. Tim, how about you?
From a product standpoint, super simple. Shame that it took me long enough to do this. Buying decent Tupperware. I thought when you asked that question, I was like, no, you know what actually influenced my life? Having like a whole set of Tupperware that I could meal prep for the entire week right then and not run out of Tupperware. That was probably one of the best purchases in the past 3 months.
Okay.
In terms of a book, Daring Greatly from Brene Brown. I think that was a really good read. It sort of talks about all different aspects, part of it being vulnerability, part of it being shame, and just sort of allowing yourself to tackle some of these emotional hurdles that I think a lot of us deal with, but sometimes cover up because it is the easier choice to do.
My next question is there any quote or mantra you live your life by?
I'm going to go back to the previous question, John, really quick and say that it's Thinking Fast and Slow I've been working on.
Okay,
Blink I did finish. Thinking Fast and Slow is one that, man, it's just heavy, and it's not the best book. It's not the best book to read when you're like lying in bed at night trying to fall asleep. So anyways, moving forward. So quote to live by. There is an Abraham Lincoln quote that I really like that I saw a while ago now, but I actually just came up. I revisited it a few months ago. Every person's happiness is their own responsibility. And I really like that because, obviously he's not saying shouldn't try to make other people happy or, don't bring joy to others. He's talking about yourself. So ultimately the decisions that you make and kind of the choices that you make, if they're not contributing to your own happiness, well, then that's on you. That's your responsibility. You have your choice. Right. So I think that's a powerful message. And in a time when, during a pandemic, it's really easy to be unhappy about a lot of different things. What are the things that bring you joy and bring you happiness? Well, you're responsible for finding and seeking out more of those things.
Yeah, I think a lot of times, kind of like you said, people look to blame other people or other things before they look within. That kind of goes back to what Tim was saying too about just control what you can control. So I like that a lot. How about you, Tim?
I remember talking to my mom one time, and she said, if you can make a positive impact on a single person's life during your lifetime, then you've been a success. And I've really tried to take that to heart, especially from an academia standpoint now. It's amazing how small things can influence somebody's life to such a huge extent. I had one student one time, I made a comment on their exam, and I said something to the extent of, this is the work I've known you've been capable of. And I wrote that when they were a freshman. They came and talked to me as a senior and said that was the catalyst that wanted them to go to med school. And that was what forced them to change their study habits at that point in time. And I was like sitting there, I was like, son of a gun, like literally it was one comment. I could have been doing this entire time. And so think about the different small moments throughout your day. And if you can make one impact on a person, you don't know what that's going to do. And sort of that butterfly effect, if you would, and just sort of cause a rippling to influence other people as well.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And next, our last question, signature question of the show. Tim Reynolds, Bryan Guski, what are your favorite snacks?
This was really tough because I tried to narrow it down to one.
Big snacker.
Yeah. No, I love snacking, and I have various that honestly came to mind, and because I don't really have a standout one. It's like I'm not good with those questions of like what's your favorite food either, because I like so many different things. Bonitos. I don't know if you've ever seen these in the grocery store. They're Bonitos cheese. They're essentially like cheese puffs, but they're made with either black bean or like some other kind of bean. So they have a healthy twist on them, but man, they are really good. I grew up loving Cheetos, and since having kicked that addiction, these have really filled that void. And yeah, I mean, I'm a big chip guy, so Bonitos definitely.
So can you dip them in anything, or
you can totally dip them in whatever you want. It's like dipping a Cheeto and you know, whatever. Dip, hummus, yogurt, whatever, you know.
Okay, it sounds like a very, very versatile snack. And
it's a very versatile snack.
And how do you spell that?
Bonitos, Bean. I believe it's Itos.
Beanitos.
Bean, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
He's trying to disguise the bean, Benettos.
Yeah, they're French.
Okay. But yeah, no, that sounds like a great snack. I appreciate this one's a little bit more unique than some of my previous guests. I know a lot of people try to hide behind a snack they don't love, but Bryan, I appreciate you coming out and just telling me Beanitos is it. So
yeah,
thank you.
Yeah,
all right, Tim, what do you got for me?
I'm probably a smart food cheddar popcorn fan. Okay. That's like a guilty pleasure. I could crush a bag of that if I had access to it. But it's kind of like catch-22 because then all this the cheddar ends up on your fingers, and so it's like not the most optimal snack and be productive food because then you just mess up everything that you're working on. So
that's the best part though, on the fingers, man. That's when
you get that extra lick, right?
Oh yeah.
So are you eating this popcorn while you're watching Netflix and grading, or when's the
to all my students that are listening to this and wonder why their papers come back with slight smudges on them, there's a pretty good chance that's why. So
all right, that's all the questions I have for you guys. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me. Where can people find you?
Yeah, so if you want to check us out, they can check out our website, moversandmentors.com. That has links to all our social media. We're pretty active on Instagram and Twitter. Recommend that if you do have any questions, please reach out to us. We always appreciate hearing from our readers. And we'll be able to give John our Instagram and Twitter handles also to our personal pages if you have questions there as well.
Anything else to add, Bryan?
No, they can find us there. Shoot us an email. Our personal emails are somewhere on there, I believe, but we can send those to you, John, if you have more personal questions about any of our kind of career experiences or tracks up until this point. Yeah. But as Tim said, feel free to give us feedback on the book. We love hearing from people that have gotten it and are reading it. We really enjoy that. So yeah, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Absolutely. And thanks again, guys, for coming on, and best of luck in 2022. I'm sure a lot of the readers are going to go out and purchase the book and take a lot of value from it.
Awesome, John. Thank you. Appreciate you.
Thanks for having us.
See you later.